as far as the amplifier goes, David Gilmour uses the high watt purely really as a power amp, because the preamp stage on it is using the alembic preamp, which is a bass preamp, I guess a valve preamp, but it was based on the design of the Silverface Dual Showman or Fender Twin reverbs, which is what I use, and I use the front preamp stage of those, and I've had the power amp stage of the Fender Twins modified to behave and sound like the power amp of a high watt, and then I use the high watt quad box as well with those, and they're all mic'd up into a mixing desk, and for each sound I can decide what I want to listen to. The whole thing's a blend. It's kind of like as if you were in a studio working on a sound, trying to figure out what to use, and I just basically the concept is to have that on the road. So welcome to the machine.
I also have a Fender Silverface with the 4x12 high watt. I actually use, for a lot of the sounds, I use the Line 6 Pod X3 Pro, which does a lot of the sounds, can do a lot of the sounds and gives a certain clarity to the PA, but I've also got the amp to be able to sort of get feedback and a certain sort of valve edge to it. I use a Boss unit, a rack unit as well, to get a lot of the standard guitar effects, but the main parts of the sounds of my effects setup are the individual pedals that come in before the Line 6 gear and before any of the Boss, which is things like the Pete Cornish P2, which is basically one of the pedals which David Gilmour himself uses, and it's just the best fuzz pedal I've ever heard. So you put that in and you compare it to a Line 6 one, and much as I love the Line 6 gear, it's never going to sound the same as a £500 fuzz pedal. It's just amazing. And then things like the compressors, there's a certain combinations. I mean, we'll show you when we go out there, but there's certain combinations of compressors that work on particular sounds, for example, like Brick in the Wall, and just to get the different sort of the plosives and the sustain. So it's sort of cascading distortions or cascading compressors. So it's just a lot of equipment that goes into it, and I think as well, when Steve was building his rig, there are things that are available now that weren't available when you were putting all your rig together, and vice versa. There's things now that Steve's got which are great, which people just don't make anymore, and they're really rare, and I haven't been able to get into mine. So there's our rigs are different, but then we try and make them sound as similar as possible, not because I want to sound like Steve or Steve wants to sound like me, but because we're both trying to sound like David Gilmour. So it's by the nature of the job, we both end up trying to sound the same.
It is, and that they're both, the concept is they're both a hybrid of both old and new technology, and it's to get the sound, it's after trying for years of buying different bits of equipment for me personally, and absolutely tweaking it, trying to get it to sound as close. I've kind of discovered it, if you just go and get the real thing, the genuine article, and plug it in, and it's just like, well, it just does what it says on the tin, it sounds, and that's kind of the route we're trying to go, is a bit of both. I think what they tend to do is to round the sound off when you actually add that element to it. Without it, you can have a sound which is very almost DI'd sounding, very very clinical and very bright and toppy, and you'd never associate David Gilmour's sounds with that thin, direct sound. But when you add the Leslies, it's incredible what it does to it. I kind of see all of those aspects as it's a bit like a Swiss Army knife for guitar rigs, and they're all certain elements, and you listen to his sound and think, I think he's using this, and this, and they're all tools that you put in, and hopefully you replicate it as close as possible. I actually asked Phil Taylor, because I thought I'd get more information out of Phil, who did. He kept his cards close to his chest as well, really. But no, we were talking about capacitance values on amplifiers, and because my background's electronics, so I find that very interesting. So that's kind of the technical side of it. I enjoy as much as playing, really. The building of the guitar rigs is something I really enjoy. So, and so does Dave as well. We're both sharing that technical background. So we're geeks, really. Solder geeks.
Before this, I got a recording studio, and I've spent years, dealing with lots of different studio equipment and having to solder up patch bays and make sure that they've got no noise and no hums and buzzes and stuff like that in it. So, applying that to a guitar rig like this, where you've got 12 different pedals and different rack equipment, and it comes in handy. I was going to say a lot of the obvious things, like what pedals David Gilmour uses and what amps he uses. It's pretty much readily available. I don't know whether it was as readily available when you were putting your first rig together, but nowadays, when I was doing mine and sort of doing research for sounds, obviously there's a lot of websites out there. I remember magazines when I was growing up. When I was 13, 14, I'd be reading magazines which would list out various things he had on his rig, but it's never quite the detail, because they'll say, oh, he's got this univibe pedal and this fuzz pedal, but they don't talk about how they've changed that component and this component. So you can sort of get 85, 90% of the way there by just reading articles, but to get into the detail, you've got to have an ear for it. Saying that, if you can't play like it, if David Gilmour was to walk in here now, pick up a Strat, plug into a straight Fender Twin, just turn it up and play, he'd still sound like him, because it's in his fingers. So.
I think there's that story of Eddie Van Halen invited Jeff Beck over to his house, and he had his Eddie Van Halen stack rig guitar. Jeff Beck got on it, and Eddie Van Halen was just like, you just sound exactly like you do on the record, and you haven't done anything. And it's all about that. So a lot of it is in the fingers as well, and technique and playing. But I think as far as the technical side of it goes, it is a question. Sometimes you can buy, as Dave said, trying to source equipment years ago, before eBay existed, it was impossible. And in Adelaide, there's probably about, one of those effects unit might have come from England to Adelaide in the last 20 years or whatever, and for the chance of you buying it, it's just impossible. So when I came to England 15 years ago, and then eBay came out, for the first 6 months I was buying dozens of these pedals, and the problem is they all sound different. So even though you've got an MXR script logo Dynacomp compressor, you can line 10 of them up, and they're so old, and it's probably had work done on them as well over the years. They all sound different. So it is a long process of trying to find even the right little gem pedal that has the right sound to it.
I think from a certain point of view, I think not that he's just said that to make me feel bad, but I've actually come in and had quite an easy job as far as that goes, because putting together this rig, and also through most of my kind of professional guitaring life, I have had eBay, and to be fair, the digital effects, things like the Line 6 and the Bass and others, are so much vastly better than what was available in sort of 1990, to all through the mid-90s, where, let's face it, digital effects were not particularly great. You had things like the Zoom 2020, which was probably better as a light show than it was as a guitar effects unit. I remember those kind of things. It's whereas you know, nowadays there are some really good digital units, which has made my job easier than Steve's, I think. So.
Thanks.
So that's
So he gets more money.
yeah. Well,